Welcome to Padres Corner. It's the show where we talk about pretty much anything. It's dedicated to the folks, the men, the women, the geeks, the gals of chat realm. I'm Father Robert Ballas here, the digital Jesuit, PadreSJ in the Twit TV chat room, and we're going to talk all about the things that we think are important to the folk from Twit TV. Now, what is Padres Corner, you may ask yourself? A while back, I sat down with Lisa and Leo, and I said, hey, how about this? What if, without your knowledge, I would hijack the stream and just bring up a couple of topics that slip through the cracks of the daily week's news? Or even better, what if I take the stories and take a slightly different bent? Now, they couldn't give me approval because they were afraid they would get sued out of existence, so this show doesn't technically exist. We're not on the schedule. If you go to twit.tv/Cal, you will not find us, and that's because this is sort of our version of pirate radio. Now, our first story is going to be something a little bit different. How about this? Have you ever heard about how difficult it is to get a device implanted during surgery? Now, we see this all the time in modern medicine where a patient will need to be monitored, and the monitoring is kind of clunky. You either need some sort of external sensor, or you need to have something implanted inside the patient, and that's always iffy. Many of the implants have either had a huge clunky battery, which meant that it was incredibly uncomfortable and really not that good for the patient, or they've had some sort of wireless power system. What we've seen is they typically have a coil, and then they have some sort of power device that you can press up against the skin, and it wirelessly transmits power. But then, of course, you're tethered to this huge, nasty kind of power supply thing. Not a really good thing to have. So some researchers came up with something a little different. What they found was a way to implant a biodegradable battery. Now, check this out. This thing actually dissolves in the battery. What they can do is they can create a battery that is made out of a couple of substances that are completely neutral in the human body. An engineer at Draper Laboratory, which is a nonprofit R&D center in Cambridge, developed this from a magnesium foil anode and iron or tungsten cathode. The electrolyte, which is actually that solution that causes the chemical reaction resulting in electrical power, is a phosphate buffered saline solution. Now, these metals will dissolve in the human body over time, and it's really no worse for wear. These are minerals and elements that are found in the bloodstream in any case. And the electrolyte is really not that far off from saline, which is something that we give to patients when we need to get their blood pressure up and when we think that they've been bleeding out. Now, the cool thing about this biodegradable battery are the applications that come from it. We've already developed a implantable microchip. Back in 2012, they created a silicon chip that would degrade inside the human body. Now, I believe that came from a researcher by the name of John Rogers. He wanted to create something that could monitor temperature or mechanical strain and relay the information wirelessly to an external device. Well, it worked, but the problem that he had was the power source. I mean, it doesn't matter if the chip is biodegradable if the power source isn't. What we don't want is, again, we don't want people to be walking around with that external power, and we also don't want people to have two surgeries, a surgery to implant the device and then a surgery to take it back out. What if, and this is the cool thing, you combine those two technologies, the biodegradable battery and the biodegradable chip, and now you have a way to monitor patients with a device that will just naturally dissolve and become part of the human body. This is actually groundbreaking medical technology, and I'm sure we're going to see more of this. Now, they have a couple of kinks to work out. One of them is that it's not a whole lot of power. Right now, the cell that they came up with, which is 1 square centimeter, produces about 2.4 milliamps of current, which isn't a lot. I mean, it's enough to drive a simple temperature or strain sensor, but it degrades in the body within a day. That's just because the body will attack the cell. They're working on creating a few different types of electrolyte solution and a new type of membrane that would keep the cell from completely dissolving. But until that, it's going to be in the research and development stage. Still, hugely interesting and hugely important for anyone who's ever had to worry about having something implanted in their body during a surgery. Now, let's move on. How about this? How many of you, when you were a kid, when you were young, found a star up in the sky and named it after yourself or someone you loved? I mean, I think a lot of us have done that. Even if you didn't name a star, you probably found a star, one of your favorites, something that you thought was just that that ephemeral piece of the heavens come down to your eyes. Well, that star is probably still there. I mean, we know that stars are one of the most primal forces in the universe. Big balls of gas that are fusing together, creating light and heat, tremendous heat. One of the most powerful forces of nature. And yet, my question to you is, that star, that thing that you love so much, as strong as it may be, do you think it could survive a supernova blast to the face? That's right. We've got a picture from the Chanda X-ray Observatory, along with a cluster of ground-based telescopes that have found a supernova remnant. A supernova remnant, this blast obviously occurred a few million years ago because the light's just getting to us now. But what's strange about the supernova remnant isn't that it's a supernova remnant. We've actually seen supernova remnants before. We've seen dozens, hundreds of supernova remnants, because we know that supernovas are, again, one of the primal forces of the universe. That's how elements get distributed throughout the cosmos. What makes this strange is that this was a binary system. Now, we've seen binary systems before, and the interesting thing about binary systems is that they have two stars, and typically when one star starts to die, when it exhausts its fuel, it starts to pull away the fuel from its companion star. That's just how it works. Well, eventually the star that's pulling away fuel will go into nuclear overload, and, well, we get a big old bang. Now, imagine this. They found this supernova remnant. We found that this binary star system had gone supernova, that it had distributed its gases, its elements throughout the universe, through the cosmos, but the companion star is still there. That's right. The companion star took a supernova to its galactic face. It's essentially the solar equivalent of the knockout game, and it's still standing. It really is an amazing occurrence, something that they can't quite explain yet. It had to be a very, very tough star, a very tough composition, typically 20 to 25 times the size of our current sun, but it also had to be far enough away that the explosion didn't completely destroy it. This is one of these things that I love about science. I love about the fact that they're looking for these things in the heavens, because it's a weird occurrence. And every time we find more of this information, we understand a bit more about the cosmos. Now, something else that I really like about supernovas, and actually this film is from how the universe works. If you have a Netflix account, look it up. It's worth watching this episode 6 of season 1, because it's a wonderful documentary of such a primal force that we can actually take a look at. Well, again, one of the things that I love is that in looking at the supernova remnant, we have seen what may be possible in some of the other binary star clusters. And now that we know what's possible, it's easier to point our telescopes, both our space-based and our ground-based telescopes, at those clusters, at those remnants, and perhaps figure out some of the physics that happens when you have such powerful explosions occurring in space. Now, if that's not going to get you warmed up, I don't know what is. And I think that we could all agree that if that supernova was a Chuck Norris, the other star just kicked it in the face and left it for dead. How about that? Now, folks, as much as I love space, as much as I love talking about the universe, I thought maybe now might be a good time to check in with our good friend, Allyn Spagnola.
And cue music. Cue music.
Whoa, whoa.
Cue music.
Yeah. Oh. Come on. Oh. You're pulling bootstraps. You've got that sled and cab, that mountain you attacked till you thought you'd collapse. Now this is go time. Yeah, this is your time. You're running, make the climb. All that's left is the ride up. Yeah, you're putting hard work and you know that it's time to reap what you sow. Take a breath, look around, feel the ground, take your pose and go.
And cue music.
Oh boy, yeah. Oh, oh yeah. Oh.
Thanks to our friend Ali Spagnola for that. That's actually a audition tape she did for So You Think You Can Dance. What I love about her is, you got to remember, that she's not just dancing. She wrote that song. She sings her own music. She plays her own instruments. She really is a Renaissance content creator, a Renaissance artist, and we just love her to death. So, Ali, thank you so very much for letting us play just a little bit of your content. Now it's time to go into the more serious part of Padres Corner. You know I like to rant. Previously I've ranted about nuclear energy, I've ranted about privacy, I've ranted about banking, I've ranted about leverage buyouts. This one is a little bit more depressing. Now, you may have remembered slavery in this country. It was kind of a big thing. It caused a couple of ripples. And then slavery kind of phased out, but we still had this thing called indentured servitude. And the idea was someone gets into debt, and well, they're basically your slave. They'll never get out of debt. They're always going to be paying off what they owe you because the debt continues to accumulate. Well, we being of a very cultured society and being a very high-minded, high-moral people, we got rid of that, right? Well, sort of. We dumped most of our debtor prisons back in the 1800s, but the problem is they're back. Yeah, that's right. Right now, it's back in Alabama in a little place called, what is that? Harpersville. Now, imagine this. Imagine this. You're down on your luck. Let's say that you had a car accident. You've been trying to work, but you got into this horrible car accident about 10 years ago, and it's really messed you up. It's damaged your back. You can't lift anything without excruciating pain. Well, you get fired from your job because it takes you a little too long to recuperate, and now you're on the dole. You're trying to survive on $670 a month that you get in disability payments. Okay, well, that's horrible enough as it is, but let's say that you won't accept that. You don't want to accept the fact that you're going to be on the state dole for the rest of your life, so you try to work. You try to get odd jobs. And, of course, your jobs never last that long because you are injured, because people can't really ask you to do all the things that they would normally ask an employee to do, but you keep trying. Dozens of jobs, hundreds of jobs over a decade. The problem is, even though it kind of helps, it's still not really keeping you above the income curve. You are definitely poor. You're definitely in poverty. You're definitely below that poverty level, but you're proud, so you keep trying. One of the things that you have to do, because you live in the middle of Alabama, is you have to drive. You're in rural Alabama. There's nothing around you, so you have to drive 2-3 hours to every potential job. All right, that's bad enough as it is. But let's say you get a ticket. And let's say because your state doesn't accept a layaway program, you can't pay your ticket. So they suspend your license, which they do in Alabama for non-payment of a moving violation. All right. Now you've got a suspended license, but you still need to go to work. You still want to go to work. Again, you're not going to accept the fact that you're going to be living off of other people's taxes, other people's income for the rest of your life. It's a matter of pride for you. Then one day, you get pulled over. You get pulled over because you have a busted taillight. And now you get fined for the busted taillight, for driving without a license, and for driving without insurance. That fine comes to a total of $745, which, of course, living on your $670 a month plus whatever you can make from your odd job, you're not going to be able to pay off immediately. Well, with the first month that you miss that payoff, when you can't pay it off, your probation is turned over to a third party. That's right. There's a private probation company. They buy your contract from the state, and from then on, they own you. They own your probation. They own your punishment. So you're called into court. You're arrested when you can't pay their layaway terms because you're just not making enough. I mean, after food and after rent, there's maybe $10 left, $20 left. That's not enough to meet their $40 to $50 a month that you have to pay to this private probation company. All right. So you go into court, you decide to have your day, but it's not really court, and you don't really have your day because, again, it's a private company. And instead of deciding whether or not you're guilty, whether or not you should be thrown into jail, they put you into the county lockup for 7 weeks, and you get charged $31 a day to be in that county lockup before you ever see the inside of a courtroom. Yay. Now, with fees, with fines, with penalties, you owe the state somewhere between $6,000 and $10,000, which, of course, is way out of your realm. There's no way you're going to be able to afford it. And the only thing that your state-appointed lawyer can do is to make a bargain with the company that owns your probation, that you will live in one of their company towns. It's a town that they specifically created so that people can work off their debt. Okay, well, that sounds reasonable. You get to that town, but here are the terms of your probation. You cannot leave that town. You must live in that town. You must work in your town. You cannot leave the boundaries. Therefore, everything you buy must be bought from that town. And, oh, and by the way, the company owns all the stores in that town, and they can charge you whatever they'd like. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a nightmare. This is not something from the 1800s. This is something that's happening right now. This is a story of a woman by the name of Deborah Shoemaker Ford. What I explained to you is what happened to her, and she's still in that debtor's prison to this very day. Now, you're probably asking yourself, wait a minute, how is this even possible? Are you kidding me? This is the United States. Well, no, this is possible. This is part of the privatization of our justice system. In 2005, they reopened the debtor's prison in Harpersville, Alabama, and it's really been big business. It's unconstitutional. We know that. Back in 1983, the Supreme Court ruled in Bearden versus Georgia that it was unconstitutional to jail a probationer for failure to pay a fine without first checking to see if paying that fine violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. In other words, the Supreme Court ruled that you cannot be put into jail simply because you're too poor to pay a fine. If you have been making a good faith effort to be a productive citizen, you should not be thrown into jail. Well, unfortunately, Harpersville derives most of their income from this new industry, this new business of being an indentured service town. Before 2001, they got most of their city revenue from speeding tickets. Harpersville was known as a speed trap. But since 2001, about 90% of their income comes from the fees paid to them by the probationers and from the income from things like the general store and from the housing. Now, JCS, which is the private company that bought the probationers' contracts, that bought the probation, is called the Judicial Correction Service. It was put together by a group of locals who lived in Harpersville, who knew how it worked, by some bankers and by some law enforcement officials. Since then, since 2006 to 2009, they've doubled their revenue to $13.6 million a year. Now, all of that is from fees from probationers. Now, here's the thing. There's going to be some people who are going to look at this and say, well, I mean, it's not all that bad because, honestly, even though it sounds bad, these are people who are going to be in trouble with the law anyways, and these are people who are not really providing anything productive to the country. And what JCS has done is they've taken that expense away from the county. They've taken it away from the state. And the state loves that. The state loves the fact that they have essentially 10,000 prisoners that they don't have to pay for. They don't have to house. They don't have to feed. On the other hand, what we've seen in so many of these cases is because they're poor, because they can't get any decent jobs inside these probationer cities, these debtor prisons, that they will never get out of debt. In fact, the program takes 40% off the top. That's their cut of whatever salary you might be making. After that 40%, you have to cover your rent. You have to cover your food. You have to cover anything that you have to buy, your life essentials. And then out of that, you have to pay off your fees, your fines, whatever it is that you owe. The problem is interest is accruing on those fees and those fines, which means at the end of the month, you end up owing more than you did at the beginning of the month. Well, folks, I don't know about you, but that sounds crazy. It sounds crazy for a lot of reasons, and not just because this idea of a debtor's prison seems to go against so much of what the United States is about, but also because, well, and I know this is going to be a trigger point for a lot of you people. It speaks so much about the disparity in justice in this country between the rich and the poor. Now, wait, don't go crazy yet. I know that this is a hotbed issue for some people, but consider this. In these debtor prisons, which don't exist just in Alabama, they actually exist from Ohio all the way to the eastern seaboard. There's been thousands and thousands of cases that have been decided this way. You're only going to get caught in them if you can't pay, if you're poor. In other words, if you have no money to give yourself a legal recourse. And in essence, you're being put into prison because you are poor. I mean, these are just parking fines, folks. These are not hardened criminals. These are people who couldn't afford to pay a civil fee. On the other hand, you have something like the case of Ethan couch. You may remember this kid. He was the one who crashed a pickup truck back in June of last year into pedestrians on the sidewalk. He was filled with Valium and something like 3 times the amount of alcohol that was legal for an adult. And then he was let off because of affluenza. His lawyer was able to successfully argue that because he was so rich, because his parents were so wealthy, because he had been given everything in life, he didn't know the difference between right and wrong. And they got a judge to agree with him. They got a judge to say, well, yeah, I guess that's right. If he didn't know right or wrong because he grew up in a privileged household, well, he shouldn't have to go to jail. So where does he go? Right now, he's here in California. He's at a private institution for people to be rehabilitated, and his parents are paying $500,000 for him to be there. Now, I don't know about you, but there's something about that strikes me completely wrong. On one hand, you're too rich to go to jail, and on the other hand, you're too poor to get justice. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat or Libertarian. I don't care what your parties are. There is something that is innately wrong with the system, and it's not centered on ethnicity. It's not centered on who you are. It's centered on how much you can pay. And that, I just will not abide. Okay, now that I've got that rant out of the way, I think I know what we need. What we need is someone who could give us hope, someone who can give us a chance to get away from all the horrible, horrible things that are plaguing our society, someone that will give us just a peek, a nice little peek into what it means to be Superman.
Looks good. Okay. If found, return to Sam Gorski. This ought to look pretty cool.
Superman! It's an honor!
Is there anyone else in that building?
No.
Good. Citizens?
Think this belongs to you?
My camera. Oh, man, my yard. Oh, dang it. Superman.
Fan of our videos? Support us on Patreon and help us make even more.
You can help fund our films and get sweet rewards too. Click on the video to find out how.
Of course, that were our friends over at Corridor Digital once more. We've been playing a lot of their videos recently just because I'm really enamored by what they do. Now, if this is your first episode of Padres Corner, you may not have seen some of their previous work. Definitely go over to their YouTube channel at youtube.com/corridordigital. what they've done with just two guys who can tell a story and have really good, just awesome skills at special effects is they've created an empire of content that previously could only be created by a big studio. And they've done it in a warehouse with a couple of computers running Adobe After Effects. It's really inspiring for anyone who's in the content creation game to see what they've been able to do. The other thing that you really should do is go ahead and follow them on their Twitter channel. It's twitter.com/CorridorDigital or @CorridorDigital. Please drop by and say hi. And specifically say hi and tell them that you saw their content on Padres Corner, and let them know how much we've really enjoyed seeing them day after day after day. Now let's get to it, ladies and gentlemen. We have with us a very special guest, someone who's been on several of my shows, someone who I very much respect, someone who I think is pretty much Superman. If you're a storage person, he is, without a doubt, Superman. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Allyn Malventano. Allyn, thank you so very much for being here. That's not you. That's Dale Chase. Thank you for being part of Padres Corner, and good evening.
How do you want me to follow that one up? Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, well, just fly through the sky and show us your moves, and we'll be all good.
See, then we'd be doing this in person. It'd be a lot easier. I wouldn't have to pay for airplanes.
Now, Allyn, for the folks who have not seen you, of course, you've been a regular guest on This Week in Enterprise Tech. You are part of the PC Perspective podcast, and you're a storage guru. Do you want to tell the folks about how you got into this game and why you seem to be so knowledgeable about storage?
How I got into it? Oh, my goodness. Well, the short version is I found a bug in the original Intel X25M SSD. And then at that time, I was just average Joe, who was particularly hard on his storage devices. And I ended up trying to get other people from other review sites to try to replicate the issue. And sure enough, Ryan Shroud, our editor-in-chief, got back to me and was like, well, mine's doing the same thing now that you told me what to do to it. Where do we go from here? Tried to feed stuff back to Intel to get the problem fixed. And then one thing led to another, and I ended up writing an article about it for PC Perspective as the storage editor.
Got it. Let me ask you this. How do you look for bugs? I mean, people run into bugs all the time, but you were specifically looking for a problem with the SSD. What does that entail?
Well, you mean from a review standpoint?
Oh, yeah.
Well, really, it's just you're just running it through accelerated testing, right? As a storage reviewer, you're just taking a solid-state drive and trying to hit it with as much as you possibly can before the time at which you have to publish the review on whatever that drive is. And different types of workloads, and actually just interpreting what the results are. So if we see something where we hit an SSD with a specific type of workload and it performs kind of underwhelmingly compared to other drives for that particular kind of workload, then maybe we'll start pulling the string and seeing, oh, maybe there's an actual issue there. But anymore, there's not usually issues. Most of these SSDs are pretty consistent across the board. And nowadays it's more or less just a, here's how this one performs compared to the other ones, and not so much a bug report.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Thank you for being on Padres Corner. It is nice to have you back. I think it's been a while since we've had you on twice. We're going to have to fix that. We're going to have to correct that. And I keep forgetting, I want to extend you an invitation to be on Know How, because we've got some interesting projects involving arrays of SSDs. And I think
sweet.
Yeah, exactly. Now, so you know what I'm talking about. You know what we're going for. It's basically what I was looking for in that. We'll talk offline, but let me give the audience a hint. I need some way to push enough data through a big array of SSDs to actually stretch them out, and I'm having difficulty doing that. So but we'll talk. Now, you think maybe we can get to a couple of stories?
Sure.
All right. The first one I think is actually right up your alley. We talked about this a little bit on Know How this week. It's all about the GeForce, the Nvidia GeForce GTX Titan. Now, this is the black version of the Titan, which already was powerful enough. This was just an amazing piece of engineering that allowed people to get unprecedented amount of power out of a card that would go into your computer. Allyn, do you think is it too much to say that this was really a supercomputer on a card?
This is an awful lot of compute jammed into one card. I will definitely give it that.
Yeah. Well, as much compute as this was on a card, they upped it up. They now are releasing the Titan Z, which has a total of 5,760 cores. It has 12 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory, a 384-bit memory bus. It can process a total of 8 teraflops. That's 8 freaking teraflops while running at about 700 megahertz, while the previous version, the one that you're seeing on screen, the GTX Titan Black, could run 889 to 980 megahertz. Now, the card is going to be released sometime in April, and it's going to be priced at, Alan, what's the price?
$3,000.
Okay, I'm sorry. Wait. I have to. Okay, I'm good now. Yeah, so $3,000. Now, we know that the Black, which was the version before it, was about half as powerful, but had half as many cores. It didn't have as big a wide of a memory bus, but that sold for $1,000. And when that one came out, I was impressed, but at the time I said, that's a crazy amount of money. Now we've got a card that's twice as fast, but costs 3 times as much. What are your thoughts? Lay it on me.
Okay, so like anything, this does have its place. The issue is, what is its place, right? Because here's your points and counterpoints, right? You have a single Titan Black actually performs better than half of this dual GPU card, right? There's a Titan Black. Oh my goodness. What is Leo doing back there?
Allyn Malventano.
I'm sorry, we had that little break. They're home, so I had to say hello. No, but I'm sorry, continue. Okay, tell me all about this card.
All right. Yeah, you got to leave that in there, by the way. That's awesome. This is, like on paper, it's twice the card, right? But they actually had to clock these GPUs on the Titan Z back a little bit, most likely because of just the thermals of, you're cramming an awful lot of power into a pretty small space there. So the Titan Black ran, all the way up to like almost a gigahertz, and this is going to run around 700, probably a little bit more if you overclock it. But so you're already at a fraction of the clock speed, right? So if you have anything that's just going to use one GPU, something coded to just talk to one GPU at a time, you're limited to already a slower speed than you would have been if you had a single Titan Black at a third of the cost, right? Now, if you wanted to have something that could talk to multiple GPUs, yes, there would be an advantage to it with this if you could only fit maybe one card in your machine, but then why not just plug 2 of them in and use 2 slots, right? In addition to that, the Titan Z has a little bit more of a disadvantage because those 2 GPUs are speaking over one set of bus lines, right, to talk to the system, versus that hypothetical 2 Titan Blacks, which each one had its own PCI Express by 16 slot.
Right.
So there's, it's kind of weird, but I would say if you had one of those really small cases, like those really small
you only have
EVGA
one slot.
cases, and you only have one slot, right? This is as much GPU as you can get on a single by 16 slot, right? It really is an awful lot of power. And if you're stuck in that particular situation, then yes, this is your card. But me in that situation, I would take that extra grand and buy an awesome case and just have more room, and then just buy 2 GPUs.
Anytime I see an announcement like this, a new product like this, what comes to mind is, oh, okay, so the reason why I wouldn't do an SLI of 2 of the lower end products that actually would have more effective throughput is because I want to get 2 of these things. So in other words, they're building these new cards for people who want to get 2 of these $3,000 monsters and drop them into the computer and get 16 teraflops of processing power. That sounds insane. You were working out the power requirements earlier on the show. Did you ever figure out exactly how much of a power supply you would need for something like that?
So a Titan Black is probably around 400 watts. I'm not sure how much they can even pull. I mean, we don't have an actual number on this specific card, obviously, because nobody's plugged it into something like a power meter. But I would guess somewhere around 600 watts if you're trying to power 2 of them, but dialing them back maybe a little bit. I really couldn't see how they could keep it at the power spec of the original single card, right?
It feels like we're going to get to that point where these newer cards are just going to have their own power supplies.
I mean, really, so this space heater is only like 1,200 watts. right? And so this is going to be a card that draws 600 watts, which is actually this space heater on the low setting. If I turn it to low, yeah, it's just kind of, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
It's an awful
power.
lot.
Yeah. Now, how long do you think it will be before someone tries to stick 4 of these things on a motherboard and turn it into a Dogecoin mining rig?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think you could physically plug 4 in, right? Because they're triple slot, I believe, with that heatsink.
Oh, but people would find a way. They'd use a PCI riser to sort of get it out of the way. Yeah.
They'd have to use a riser, and well, technically, if you go that way, then there's some motherboards where you can have 6 of these cards connected.
That's still crazy. Yeah, we're getting the crazy now.
Yeah, they're just getting, and actually, at that much power draw, there's actually, we've done a couple of reviews on PC Perspective. Actually, Ryan has done some write-ups where there's other cards that per slot, it's much more efficient, like power efficient, to be mining. And if you're going to get to the point where you're, drawing 600 watts on one card, you probably, you're weighing your electric bill versus what you're making on the mining.
Yeah. No, that's actually a part of the mining that a lot of people don't ever do. They don't figure out exactly what kind of return they're getting on investment. Unless, of course, you're a college student and you're not paying for your power. You're paying a flat rate. But yeah, if you live in a house and you pay the bills, crypto mining very rarely pays off anymore. All right, let's get past this. We know this is crazy hardware. We know that the manufacturers like to show crazy hardware every once in a while just to show people that they could create crazy hardware. But let's go to something a bit more real world, because I'd really love to hear your opinion on this. So we have now been confirmed that Apple's in talks with Comcast about creating a streaming service on Comcast. Now, this isn't just an Apple TV on a Comcast box. This isn't just Apple TV bundled with Comcast. What Apple is trying to do is to get preferential treatment for streams going through to their devices on Comcast cable. According to insiders, Comcast would provide a higher level of service for content that is streamed from the web to Apple TVs. Now, all these talks are preliminary, and we know that Apple actually approached Time Warner before the Comcast-Time Warner deal was announced and talked about doing the same thing with them. This on the surface sounds great for customers. I mean, yeah, I'm going to get an Apple TV. It's going to be bundled with my Comcast service. I'm going to get fantastic quality because more likely than not, Apple would have a deal where their content gets put onto Comcast servers, so it's on the local network. But at the same time, I am scared to death what this means for net neutrality. I mean, if a competitor can come in and say, let's say this was Netflix, and Netflix made a deal with Comcast, but not the deal you all know about. They said, we want to pay you half of our revenue, but in exchange, we want to not only be the preferred provider, we not only want to have our streams work really well, but we would prefer that Amazon and Hulu and all the other streaming network providers have degraded performance. It's really not that far of a shot from one to the other, right? I mean, when we're talking about being able to buy preferential treatment on the network, saying I'm going to pay you to give me a quality stream is almost the same as saying I'm going to pay you to degrade my competitors.
Yeah, that's the slippery slope part of this thing. They really do need to just keep it equal across the board and be very careful how they're wording that, because you are going to get, there's 10 people saying, looking at the negative side of that versus the one person that goes, oh, awesome, I can get Comcast with my Apple TV, right?
Yeah. It's killing me because there are a lot of people, and I'm not talking just about what I would consider Apple fans. There are people who are saying, oh, that sounds great. And well, why wouldn't you do this? This sort of integration is a good idea because it gives us better services. It's the same thing that we talk about when we talk about the Apple ecosystem or the Android ecosystem. It's easier to stay in one provider and get all your services, all you could eat from one player, because you know more or less all the things that are typically unknown. The problem with doing that, the problem with having that sort of vertical integration is that at some point, if they choose to do something that is not friendly to the consumer, there's nothing to stop them. I'm going to use the most obvious example here, and that's Apple. Apple makes fantastic products. I don't know anyone who's being honest, any technologist who's being honest, who won't say that Apple has really ruled the roost for the last decade. Their designs are fantastic. Their style is stellar. Their prices have been way better than the Apple of the 80s. I mean, I remember in the 80s, it used to be, yeah, you were going to pay 3, 4, 5 times more than the equivalent PC device. Well, they got their channel together, and they were able to offer us devices that had great ROI, that had great values to them at a price that many other manufacturers couldn't match. But the blowback was people who have bought into the Apple ecosystem, who have bought into that vertical development, are now stuck. And it's not any sort of prison. It's just, it's easier to stay here, and I'd rather take the penalty that Apple kicks me every once in a while with than move to something else. Well, if this becomes the norm for Comcast, if this becomes the norm for all providers, if, say, Verizon gets a deal with Roku, and let's say that AT&T goes with Netflix, then my worst fear is not rising prices and worse service. My worst fear is that we see a complete fragmentation of the internet.
Yep, and even something worse along with that is, take my situation right now. I'm about to move. I'm in an area that has, let's see, Time Warner and Uverse, and I'm using Uverse, but where I'm moving to, there is no Uverse, right? So if, say, AT&T partnered with somebody, then I wouldn't have that service at the same level that I could just because I happen to be living here versus, you know, where I'm moving to, which may only have something like Comcast, right? Just as an example.
Yeah, yeah.
That's really bad, right?
It's horrible. Actually, in my area in San Francisco, I only have AT&T. There is no other option. There is no other provider. I got a quote from Comcast. They really wanted to come down to our neighborhood, but because of the way that that San Francisco works, they were telling me it was going to cost them about $10,000 to bring it across the street. So they have service across the street from where I am. But to get it to my house, it's going to cost 10 grand. And it's like, okay. You know, technically, if you look on the map, San Francisco has 4 or 5 different providers, including AT&T and Verizon and Comcast and Time Warner Cable and Sonic.net. But any given part of the city, at most, has 2. Most of them have 1. And yeah, okay, that's enough ranting. You know, have you noticed that a lot of our stories this night are just kind of negative? Oh,
it's my fault.
No. You know what? No, it's my fault. We need something positive. We need something that's going to bring out the best in people, something that is going to inspire people to act better. Oh, I know. How about this? If you live in San Francisco and you drive next to this Facebook representative, you're probably going to get your face on a billboard if you try to text while driving.
Awesome.
Okay, so here we got. We've got this story from the Register and actually from other outlets as well, talking about Brian Singer. He is the manager of communication design at Facebook. He's so sick of people texting behind the wheel that he has taken to snapping pics of drivers who are driving while texting and then plastering their photos on one of the 11 billboards that he's purchased around the city. Now, he also started a new website called Twit Spotting specifically, which stands for Texting While in Traffic. I believe Leo has actually talked about this. Now, the stats from Twit Spotting is that 660,000 drivers are using their phones right now, that those drivers have their eyes off the road for an average of 4.6 seconds, and that 80% of vehicle crashes occur because of a distracted driver. Now, we know that's factoids that have been pumped into our head time and time again. My question to you, Alan, is this executive a hero or a jerk?
Maybe a little both at the same time. Is that possible?
I think so. Okay, explain.
Can you be a hero jerk? I don't know. I mean, it comes up. Yeah. There's probably first of all, there's probably some kind of $ thing in the end for this guy, right? He's stirring up a pot and he's obviously drawing traffic to that website because of what he's doing, right? So there's something's going to keep the status quo going for him, right? As far as money in his pocket, so to speak. Yeah. And it is a very like a controversial kind of issue, right? You have there's some people that think they should be able to do it, but really, like what I would say is the same people say no, you should not be trying to text on your phone while you're driving. If you're a passenger, fine, go to town, but if you're the one driving the car, you kind of should be paying attention to like where you're actually going and who you're not hitting, hopefully.
Hopefully. Well, see, that's the thing that gets me about this. I mean, there's a part of me that really admires what he's doing. He's trying to address something that I think most of us realize is a problem. I have seen distracted drivers do some stupid, stupid things. I've seen distracted drivers get into accidents because of what they're. I've yelled at that person coming out of a parking lot with a cell phone next to their head, thinking, really? Really? And I can understand the anger that if I had means, I would do something like this. But at the same time, you know, there are people in the chat room who are saying, wait a minute, so he's taking pictures while he's driving? No, he's not. He actually was very clear he doesn't do that. He takes pictures while he's a passenger. Well, I'm sorry, but most of us are not of the manner of means that we can afford to have a driver. You know, most of us can't buy 11 billboards across the city of San Francisco. Most of us don't have the luxury of being able to sit back, being brought to our destinations, and, you know, going about our business. So that's sort of the jerk side. And I'm really conflicted. I'm really caught. I want to admire this guy, but
what does that do, right? Even the jerk side of it, it still draws attention to the issue. It still draws traffic, right? Yeah. So he probably doesn't care if there's some people thinking he's a jerk. He probably invites it, actually, and says, well, come look at the website and find out more.
Come at me, bro.
And they will, right?
Yeah.
It's similar along the lines. Have you seen that video circulating the past couple of days about the guy that was tailgating the woman? And she just pulled out her phone, and she was actually paying attention to the road. She just pulled out her phone and just kind of like went like this and was videoing the guy. And then she kind of turns to the side as the guy finally passes her, and he's so distracted trying to flick the woman off, right, in traffic, that he ends up just sliding across, completely losing control of his truck, and almost totals his truck, and in an awesome event of instant karma.
Now, Alan, I wasn't going to, but since you brought it up, I do want to show this. Sorry, Alan, what were you saying?
No, I said the guy's following way too close, right? There's a couple of trucks in the side lane that you can't see, and that's why, you know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Here's the hero jerk thing. First of all, I would love to have taped someone who was tailgating me, but at the same time, she's operating a freaking camera while she's driving.
No, right, but she's driving, and she's just like holding it to the side. Because look,
still,
like
I mean, it's a distraction, right? I mean, you're thinking about it.
I'll grant you that. But still, I think this guy was more in the wrong than she was.
Oh, no, he was absolutely in the wrong. I mean, jerks like that make me want to not be a priest.
That's less than that was like less than half a car length, and he is in a huge truck compared to the size of that car.
By the way, I love her safety jacket. And then he was a jerk enough to want to pull even, just so he could flip her the bird.
Yeah, he backs off, and you can actually see it. Well, here it is. There he is, right?
I hate you.
And she's not catching all of it in the front.
Wait, the jerk trifecta, tailgating, flipping off, and then let's speed away. Oh, wait, this part doesn't work so well.
Whoops. Right through the median, right into the pole. Actually, he took out a tree.
That's what you get! All on video, buddy!
It's you know, redneck road rage. That video has a lot of things to it.
She gets the pass for using the phone. First of all, sorry.
Okay. He is an absolute jerk. He's the kind of person who we all hate. But at the same time, you know what? I don't want to give her the pass. I think if you want to videotape someone, why not do it like Russia? Have a videotape on in your car at all times.
That's true, and those guys catch some amazing. Actually, you know, I got one of these for Christmas, and I need to make a mount.
Wait, what is that?
What is that? It's one of those Sony, you know, the Sony version of the
GoPro. Oh, okay.
The GoPro, yeah. I like it because it sits narrower, so that's the front profile, right? It's not like a big square brick you're trying to put on a really fast-moving vehicle.
There's been a couple of vendors who have been wanting us to play with some of their devices. There's one that it's actually really, really cool because it will record, but it will only commit to memory and name the clip with a timestamp if either there's a G-force incident, so you get into an accident, or if you press a button. So it kind of addresses some privacy issues because even though it's recording, it's not keeping anything for longer than an hour unless there was actually some sort of event. I think that's the kind of device I could live with.
That's just a rolling buffer. with, a point where you tell it when to keep the recording. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, enough of this. We spent way too much time talking about rednecks and crashes and twitting. How about this? Let's talk a little bit about something that could either be the best thing ever or the worst thing ever. And that, of course, is the purchase of Oculus VR by Facebook. Now, I'm sure that you've never talked about this week, right? Right, Alan? I mean, this is not news for you at all.
No, never.
No.
Not amongst all of the PC Perspective staff at the same time.
No. Now, here are the things that we know. We know that Facebook has announced plans to purchase Oculus VR for $400 million in cash, 23.1 million Facebook shares, and an additional $300 million in cash if certain performance metrics are met. Now, although the deal is worth north of $2 billion at its current Facebook valuation, Zuckerberg has still said he wants Oculus to continue focusing on games and that they'll continue independent of Facebook, but in the future, he would like them to expand into other arenas. Back in August of 2013, John Carmack, co-founder of id Software, joined the Oculus team, specifically looking for the kind of freedom that couldn't be found at a big conglomerate, and now he's right back in there. Alan, what are your first impressions of this? I mean, I've heard both sides. I've heard people saying, okay, this could be good, this could be interesting, it gives them a lot of operating capital. I've heard other people who said, no, this kills Oculus, this kills the spirit of the company, this is the worst thing they could have done.
So from what I've heard from both sides, statements from both sides, right? You have like the main guy at Oculus issuing statements and even Zuckerberg himself, and they're both saying the same thing. They're both like, look, we're not changing everything. We're just under a different branch, so to speak, right? And I think if that actually wasn't the case, then very shortly you would find out the real answer there, because you'd find out where oh wow, why am I drawing a blank? You'd find out by Carmack would leave.
Oh, right.
So proof is in the pudding, right? He's the one sitting in the seat there, probably one of the highest seats at that company. And if he ends up just silently going somewhere else, then you know what actually happened, right? I have a feeling he's going to stick around. I have a feeling that they're going to just, that they're going to kind of be hands off and just, yes, it's under a different branch, so to speak.
Zuckerberg's not stupid. I mean, he knows he's got talent in Carmack. He's going to want to keep him around. But then we also have, you all know that Notch, who is the creator of Minecraft, Marcus Pearson, he was working with Oculus to see if maybe they could build a skinny version of Minecraft, a lightweight, stripped-down version that will run inside the Oculus Rift. And he's basically said, no, Facebook, as long as you're working with Facebook, as long as you're powered to Facebook, I will not be part of anything. And his quote specifically, he said, people have made games for Facebook platforms before, and while it worked great for a while, they were stuck in a very unfortunate position when Facebook eventually changed the platform to better fit the social experience that they were trying to build. I did not join to build a social app.
Yeah,
I could see Carmack doing the same sort of thing. I mean, that's sort of his personality, which is, if you want me to design games, that's great. You asked me to compromise my game designing integrity so that it fits better into your next generation social feature, I ain't going to do it.
So along the lines of that next generation social feature thing, I brought this up during the podcast, and it seemed like it kind of fits. Have you ever read or listened to Ready Player One?
Oh, are you kidding me? Of course.
Right?
Of course I have.
Yes. Okay, so for those that haven't, it's basically a sci-fi story about a future that is set in the social networking construct, so to speak, is all VR-based devices. You put this thing on your head, and it just kind of beams the scene right into your retinas, and it just basically puts you in an alternate world. And that is the equivalent of Facebook, basically, in that future, except it's all just VR, and you're kind of, in different areas of whatever this virtual thing, different chat rooms or different planets or whatever, right? So it just kind of like little hairs kind of stuck up on the back of my neck when I kind of saw this story, and then was like, that's just like Ready Player One, except the beginnings of it or something, years.
That was actually the first thing that I thought of when I heard about this. I was like, and they're like, well, what does VR have to do with social? I'm like, obviously you haven't read Ready Player One.
That's what made that pop into my head, was somebody asked that question. Right? It's like, this has nothing to do with the other one. I was like, of course it does.
Yeah, it does. It's like, it doesn't have anything to do with the social as we know it right now. But if you were forward thinking, you'd be saying, well, social's not forever just going to be pictures and message boards. Eventually, social online is going to be a bit more immersive. And what Zuckerberg has done, he has bought the avowed leaders of VR. I mean, there is no one even close to Oculus right now. And I kind of like that.
But as good as they are, we're still nowhere close to that vision as far as what's in that book.
Although I will say that we had a little peek about this. Have you ever heard of a company called PreOVR?
Yes.
Yeah. So we got to play with them last week. And we also took a look at their technology at CES. They make gear that attaches to your body, onto your wrists and your back, and it has ultra accurate positioning data that can be used inside PreOVR. Now, we had them in the studio, and what they showed us was how accurate it can be. And it was amazing because I'm thinking, in order for the Oculus Rift to become something like Ready Player One, the Achilles heel right now is the positioning. It doesn't work if all you have is a joystick that moves you around in real space. You want to be able to use your arms. You want to be able to use your hands. And you don't want to have to do it so clumsily that you're holding weapons and pointers like this to make them go in the right way. Well, what we saw with the PreOVR demo is because they're using some really accurate sensors, you get positioning data that's unlike any other. And I don't know. I think it's cool.
Yeah, no, it's definitely cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, so in the end, your take, is this a good thing for Facebook? Is this something that we should be worried about? Is Oculus dead? Or is this going to give them the capital to give us something that we really want?
I think for at least the short term, if not the long term, it's just going to be another bullet or like another card in Facebook's hat kind of thing. If their stock, if the Oculus takes off, Facebook stock will go up a little bit more. Right. That's my take, at least initially.
Someone in the chat room a while back had just sort of noticed. He said, you do realize that since the purchase of Oculus Rift, the rise in Facebook's stock price actually made up to $2 billion. And we're seeing that more often. It's the same thing that happened after the purchase of WhatsApp. The rise in Facebook stock was enough to make it worth it, which is cool. It's interesting, but at the same time, it makes me kind of worried because if we get back to that time where all companies care about is making a bump in the stock price, then it's like every bubble we've ever been in. And I would prefer not to have another bubble. Yeah?
Yeah.
Go figure. Okay. Well, Alan, this is normally the time in the show where we talk about the tech. First-time podcasters may be tempted to use earbud microphones for recording. After all, they come with every piece of mobile gear, and the quality is pretty decent, right?
It just drives me crazy. People use those iPhone headsets, and they can't hear it, but it rattles. A, the quality's terrible, and B, it rattles.
Now that we've established that anyone using earbud microphones for a podcast should be flogged, let's take a look at the mics that AudioTechnica offers for podcasters. The AT2020 USB and ATR2500 are side-address condenser microphones from AudioTechnica that have been designed, built, and priced for the beginning podcaster or the content creator on the go. On the surface, the two mics look similar. Both mics have USB ports that connect them directly to your laptop or desktop. Both are compatible with Mac and PC. Both use low-mass diaphragm condenser elements. Both have 16-bit analog to digital converters that sample at either 44.1 or 48 kHz. Both feature a cardioid pickup pattern. Both have LED lights to indicate when the mics are live. Both use standard threading so the mics can be easily mounted on their included tripods or any conventional microphone stand. Both are roughly the same size and weight, just a skosh over 12 ounces. At $60 to $80, the ATR2500 is the lower price sibling of the pair. AudioTechnica advertises a frequency response of 30 to 15,000 Hz, decent for podcasting and average fieldwork. In addition to the microphone itself, AudioTechnica has included a mic mount, USB cable, and a tripod stand. The ATR2500 has a built-in headphone jack with volume control buttons on the front, a feature that podcasters will like since it gives direct monitor functionality with zero delay in the audio feedback. The AT2020 USB is priced between $110 and $150. Gone are the plastic buttons and headphone jack in favor of a solid metal construction. It also expands the frequency range down to 20 Hz and up to 16,000. The AT2020 also includes a far stronger thread adapter and tripod, as well as a carrying case that houses all the bits you need to make it work. Using either microphone is easy, with a single USB cable providing both connectivity and power. Windows 7 and Mac OS X immediately recognize either AudioTechnica mic as an audio recording device. Sound quality on both mics is excellent, with clean and clear mids, especially for vocals. The wider frequency response of the 2020 gives it higher highs and lower lows, thereby making it usable for field recording of all types. But for podcasting, either mic is a solid choice.
I could go on about the quality of the 2020 and the 2500, but instead I'll point out that this review was filmed with these mics in this audio nightmare of a room, with this hard echo-producing wall, this noisy laptop, and this fan behind me. If I had tried to film this using earbuds, this is what it would have sounded like.
The first pro has to be the USB interface. It's simple, easy to install, easy to maintain. Because it's USB, it means that you don't have to worry about things like a preamp or a switch or a mixing board or a XLR to USB adapter. That's all built into the body of the microphone, which essentially makes this a miniature studio for you on the go. The other thing about the USB interface is that it's digital all the way from the microphone into your computer. People used to have to worry about the RF interference that could be generated by a laptop or a desktop, adding pops and buzzes and whines to their sound. Because it's digital all the way in, you don't have to worry about that. Now let's talk about quality. These two mics are fantastic. I mean, for what you pay for them, they are top of the line. The ATR 2500 sounds rich, and it's clean and clear, and vocals are just really easy to distinguish. The AT2020 is in another class entirely. I think this is the new gold standard for condenser microphones in this price range. In fact, it's favorable to the Shure SM58 from the previous generation. Looking at the cons, there's really only one, and it's really only for the ATR 2500. And that is that it feels a little cheap. It's not a bad microphone, it's just that the tripod feels a little bit plasticky, and the adapter feels like it could break after a couple of uses. The microphone itself is really, really good, and I like the fact that they included this interface for the headphones. But the problem is, when I look at the AT2020, well, I think I want to spend a little bit more to get the higher quality. So, buy, try, don't buy? For the 2020, it's a no-brainer. Buy it. Even if you don't want the USB interface, look for the XLR interface, which runs about $100, and get that. You can't go wrong. You'll be really happy for the quality, price, performance. For the ATR 2500, I'd say it's a try. Not again because it's a bad mic, but because I think most people will find that they'd want to spend a little bit more and get the top of the line in USB podcasting mics. This has been the AudioTechnica AT2020 and ATR 2500. I have to say that that's still the mic that I use. I use high LPR 40s in the studio. I like high LPR 40s. I couldn't afford high LPR 40s. They're really good sounding, but they have a commensurate price. Those AT2020s are microphones that I use because they sound really, really good, but also because they're at a price point that I could damage one or two and not worry about it. What do you typically use?
I've always used a AKG 270.
Oh, yeah, those are nice.
But because it was the only one I could find that was a boom type headset with a condenser mic in the boom.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? They make a dynamic version, but I didn't want dynamic. I wanted a condenser mic with phantom power and the whole works.
Yeah.
But that unfortunately means to get it to USB, I have to run it through. I'm using a Shure.
Right.
I forgot what the name of the USB converter is, right?
Yeah, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, yeah.
I've got one of those. Yeah.
But that, if they made like a 2520, I guess, if you kind of like, because I would want the 2500, like the higher quality, right? Whichever one's the higher quality.
No, the
Which one's
2020. So actually, they have it now. I'm doing a review right now of they have a brand new 2020 USB Plus, and the cool thing about that is, yes, it's the same kind of USB mic. It still has the same large diaphragm element in it.
Right.
But they now have all the controls and the audio return, the monitor feed on the microphone body. So someone
that's what I would want.
someone who wants to run a portable podcasting studio, that's the thing to use. It's actually really, really good. Again,
yeah, because especially for us on the review site, there's Ryan included. There's times where we're traveling, we're at a hotel somewhere else, we have to do the weekly podcast. We need something that we could just throw in the bag, and this monstrosity is not exactly easy to, to pack in a bag.
We'll talk. We'll talk.
Yeah.
Remind me after the show. Now, you've got something that you want to show off that's right up your techno alley. You want to show us what the future of SSD looks like?
Well, there's a couple of things. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there's other competition out there, but this is the freshest thing to launch, right? This is the Intel SSD 730 series.
Now, did you draw that on the SSD?
I did not. It actually came with it. And if I had a UV light here, they actually like a little Intel logo, I think it sits around here somewhere, glows in blue if you have it under a UV light. So they even went for like the enthusiasts kind of, people that do all the case mods with the UV lights inside of them. So I like this one because it's supposed to be marketed for consumer. It's tailored for consumer, kind of like enthusiast consumer, but still consumer nonetheless. And the guts of it are the enterprise line. It is inside of it. It is, for all intents and purposes, an SSD or a data center S3500 series solid state drive.
Right.
But they made it a consumer model. It carries the same warranty. It's like 5-year warranty. And they're pricing this one at around $1 a gig. Now, granted, it's not rated for the same amount of writing as it would be in the enterprise setting, but still, I think they rated for 70 gig per day.
Hardware. I would bet it's the same hardware if it came off the same
It's the same hardware, but for warranty purposes, that they're not certifying, but it does still have, and this is right from Intel, it still uses the high endurance technology flash. So this is the only consumer Intel SSD where they're saying, yep, it has the high endurance flash in it as well. And really, it's physically the same controller. They did a couple of tweaks just for more consumer kind of workload stuff versus enterprise and data center workload stuff, right? But yeah, and then on top of that, they overclocked the controller by 50%. So it's supposed to run at 400 megahertz. It runs at 600 megahertz. And they even increased the speed of like the data buses between the controller and the flash. So they overclocked it for you. It's not even like you have to do it.
For the folks at home who are wondering, well, what are we talking about when you say that it's sort of enterprise spec? Well, typically when you have an enterprise drive, so it's a drive that you think you're going to put into a server, it writes a bit faster. The writes have to be faster if you're going to be doing a lot of synchronous transferring. And also, it tends to last longer. I know, like, for example, the Kingston Enterprise series, you get 10 times the number of reads and writes before the cells are actually going to die, or at least they include enough redundant memory that it's going to get you the equivalent of 10 times as many writes. So it just means it's going to last longer, and typically you get faster writes.
Yeah, and it's just cool all around, basically, just what you're getting. Now, granted, it is more expensive than, say, a Samsung 840 EVO, something like that, because those drives are actually pushing in the $50 a gig now. But if you want to do enthusiast kind of level stuff, you're really, really hard on your SSD. One thing that these drives, because it's based on the data center version of it, this is actually the S3500 I'm holding up, because it's based on that, in the data center, those drives were required to answer any request within a very specific time. It's not allowed to ever have a hiccup, right? So like 99.9% of the time, it has to respond within a certain time tolerance. It's very, very low, regardless of what you're doing to it, right? So if you've been writing to it with 4K, the worst case scenario, 4K random writes for an entire day, the Enterprise series model had to be able to sustain that really low spec, just indefinitely, basically. So you're going to get that kind of stuff in a consumer drive for definitely a fraction of the cost of the Enterprise unit. So it's the kind of drive that, like, actually, Padre, like you and me would put in our systems. Like, we're kind of, a little crazy.
Geek, yeah.
Yeah, crazy geek kind of stuff, right?
Right now, I may actually have 8 different SSD drives in my my home system.
Yeah, and
that's not even my testing box. That's just the one I built for myself.
Yeah. So now I will say this: you do want to put this particular drive in a desktop machine because it draws close to 5 watts when you're really pushing it.
Whoa.
So that's the enterprise spec, right? It's the enterprise hardware. It's going to carry the same kind of spec. It really draws closer to 3, and then when you're not using it, when it's more idle, it's closer to 1. But you compare that with like say a Samsung A40 Evo, that thing draws like
that's a lot of power.
It's still a lot. Yeah, it is still a lot. It would definitely get warm in a laptop drive bay, kind of crammed in there, and it would also definitely put a damper on your battery life.
You would notice that 5 watts is enough to notice a good 5-10% drop in your battery life.
Yes, that you are exactly right. That's around the numbers I got when I did the math too on your typical kind of laptop setup. So if you're doing mobile stuff, you stick with even the older Intel model if you wanted to for like say a 320 series drive if you can get one on the cheap, right? That's one of the ones where they were using the original Intel consumer controller, really low power, or any of the Samsung 840 models. They're all very, very power efficient.
There you have it. Thank you. Thank you for showing this off. You know, we always like a little bit of gear porn. Now, I have one last bit of tech that I want to show off. I don't normally do this. Normally, I only do one a night, but this just arrived today, and I can't resist showing it off. This lovely little box is from Fugu. We met them at CES. They were at Digital Experience. Now, it is... I got a bow tie here. It is another speaker system, but what I like about this other speaker system is they've recognized that there are so many competitors in this space that they've done a few things that I really like about the product. First of all, they've made everything modular. So whereas one speaker you buy might sound really good, another speaker might be waterproof, another speaker might do conferencing calls, another speaker might be stylish. This one speaker system is designed to do everything because it includes these shells. These can actually be removed so that I can swap in the shell that I need at any given time. Now, actually, we've got a video here that I want to run. It's something that I received from them at CES. It's a really good overview of what they do with their product. Now, imagine you have a common core, and that common core gets you 40 hours of battery life. And that 40 hours of battery life includes stereo speakers, quad microphones, so you could put this in the center of a conferencing table and have it be your wireless Bluetooth device. It is all Bluetooth enabled, and it's a fantastic piece of machinery. Now, the thing that caught me about this is just the sound. I'm used to these portable speakers sounding a little bit tinny. I mean, they're not bad. They're good for travel, but I wouldn't use most of them on my desk at home as my home theater bar. This thing was powerful enough. It gave me enough bass response, and it sounded pure enough, clean enough that I kid you not, I would actually use it as my primary on the road, at home, wherever. Now, I know that we've got people asking for what the specs are. I'm going to save that. I'm not going to tell you what the specs are until I actually do the review before you buy. But I will say that this definitely ranks in, I'd say, my top 5 of wireless speakers of all time. I can't wait to put this under some torture tests because they gave me the waterproof case and they gave me the crash-proof case, and they gave me all the accessories that let me do things like mount this to handlebars. We've got a quad bike coming in, and, well, let's see if I can do a conference call outdoors at 60 miles an hour. I don't know. That seems crazy, but then again, that is me. Now, Allyn, thank you so very much for coming on. It's been an absolute joy to have you. It's been a wonder to have you on Padres Corner. I don't know why I don't have you on every episode of Twilight.
We'll do it.
Now to tell the folks at home who, again, some of them maybe haven't seen you on PC Perspective. Maybe they haven't seen you on This Week in Enterprise Tech. But go ahead and tell the folks where they can find you. Tell them what kind of work you're working on. Maybe a review that you've got coming up.
Actually, well, we've always got storage reviews coming up, at least from my end, at PC Perspective. All the guys at the site do basically any kind of hardware testing. We've got video card guys, we've got motherboard guys, Ryan's always testing CPUs. We pretty much just cover the whole gamut of everything that goes into a PC. We do comparisons for those that want to start flame wars or not against gaming on PCs versus consoles and the performance you can get out of a particular kind of a build for the same amount of money, for example. That kind of stuff. We're always kind of dabbling. Whenever we do a video card review, Ryan usually does tests it for how fast it is at Bitcoin mining. So there you go. And even does the cost comparisons, including the power, mind you. So that's kind of cool stuff too. So we usually try to go a little bit deeper. And especially if you listen to our podcast, we record that on Wednesday nights. Actually, it's pcpro.com/live is the link. We kind of have a mini version of the Twit cottage kind of deal, or Twit brick house for just our own podcasting stuff, right?
You know what? You don't have any version of the Twit brick house or the cottage. you have your thing. And you don't compare it to us. I've seen
That's
it.
true.
It's an awesome setup.
There
and
is a
it really
comparison.
is set up for geeks who like to test things.
There is a comparison. Like every place that tries to do some kind of video online live streaming, we have an endless random hiccups with our equivalent of a TriCaster.
Yeah.
Which is not actually a TriCaster, but it seems that no matter what you use, there's always going to be some kind of an issue.
Every platform I've seen, I have not yet seen a bulletproof platform that didn't cost under $500,000. So
yeah,
go figure. But Allyn, again, thank you so very much, and we'll have you back someday, especially when we start talking about some of the higher end hardware, because you guys at PC Perspective, nobody does it better.
Thanks.
Thank you so very much. Now, I also want to say thank you to you. That's right, the person who tunes in every Friday at 7 o'clock when Leo's not here, or actually when Leo normally isn't here, so that we can play on the stream. I want to thank you for checking out Padres Corner. I want to thank you for being part of the Twit Army. I want to thank you for watching me every week on the Twit TV network. And you can find me on the Twit TV network. You'll find me on Mondays at 2:30 p.m. Pacific for This Week in Enterprise Tech, where we're going to talk all about, enterprise technology. We'll talk about networking. We'll talk about data centers. We'll talk about servers. You can find me on Thursdays. I have two programs. I have Know-How, which right now is at 12:30. I believe it's going to be switching to 11 o'clock. And then I have Coding 101, two programs that teach you things. Either we teach you how to make stuff, how to build stuff, how to upgrade stuff, or we teach you how to program them. It's all part of the coolness that is Twit TV's, I'd say, learning annex, the learning channel for Twit TV. You can also find all sorts of programs of every type if you just stay tuned to live.twit.tv. We are the network that caters to geeks because, hey, we're geeks ourselves. Also, as long as you're checking things out, why not check out my YouTube page? This is the one I specifically created for this show, for Padres Corner. I've got another one called Gadgets, but this one is just for episodes of Padres Corner and our future content. Go ahead and drop over to youtube.com/ what is it? Oh, yeah, that's right, youtube.com/PadreSJ, and you'll be able to find every single episode of Padres Corner ever in existence. Also, I want to thank everyone who made the show possible, to all the engineers who let me play around with their gear, even though I might break it, to Lisa and Leo, who approved but can't say that they approved this corner, and, of course, to Chat Realm. You folks are absolutely awesome, no question about it. I'm Father Robert Baldassare, and this has been Padres Corner.